All right. Well, welcome everyone to a bright and early 8 a.m. webinar on putting graded activities into your D2L Brightspace course. So I just wanted to go through and talk about exactly what I'm going to cover today. I want to focus on the basics of the basics, putting assignments, quizzes, and discussions into your D2L Brightspace course. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the details. If we have time afterwards, I can definitely address some of those. But first off, I want to just cover the basics about getting a folder into your course for students to submit assignments, being able to post a discussion topic so students can start a discussion, and then how to set up a basic quiz in D2L Brightspace. In another session, we have sessions specifically designed for assignments, quizzes, and discussions, and they'll go into talking about how to set up points, set it up in the grade book, all the different settings that you can use that are associated with those tools. But right now, this class is going to focus solely on just getting the folders up, getting the discussion topic up, and getting that quiz up. So the bare bones basics that you need to get started for week 1, okay? So right now I'm on the My Home page of D2L Brightspace, and I talked about this in our Basics 1 session. And I'm going to go into my spring term course that I'm going to be teaching, and I need to add some activities to. I'm going to click on my course from the My Courses widget. Remember, the boxes on the home page are called widgets. I'm going to select my course from the 2020-02 Spring tab and go in to my EC298 class. And then what I'm going to do, there's a couple of ways you can add assignments to D2L Brightspace. You can go specifically right into the tool, and that shows you all the options that are available to you when you set up an assignment. I'm going to show you how to do it through the content area, which is very, very simple, and it just has the basic things you need to get started. And if we have time at the end, I'll go into a little bit more about what the tools and the settings features that are available to you. So first, let's go into content. And I covered content in my Basics 2 session, how to upload content and all the different types of content that you can add. And I gave a brief overview of adding a Zoom room as well. So I'm going to go into the module that I need to add an assignment to. So I'm going to go into my week 1 module. Currently, I have nothing in here, and I need to add some assignments. In the in the adding content, I showed you how to add like PDFs and PowerPoints and Word documents and all sorts of documents to this area using the Upload Create button. This is a magic button in D2L Brightspace, and it allows you to add all sorts of things to your content modules. And if you remember also, I also recommended that you organize your modules by topic or week. So everything the student needs for a particular topic or for that particular week is all in one module. They don't have to go between different modules to find all the things that they need to accomplish the activities for that week or topic. Let's click on that blue Upload Create button. And I'm going to select a new assignment. So I'll start with assignments. And you can add a new assignment directly from the content area in D2L Brightspace. I'm going to click on New Assignment. And here you'll add a title for your assignment. So let's say I'm going to have an assignment called Reflection number 1. And there's two main types of submissions to consider. And I think these are the two ones that you'll be most likely to use. And that's the file submission option, and then there's a text submission option. The on-paper submission and the observed in person options, those last two options, on paper and observed in person, those do not require any type of submission. They act as placeholders, so it's kind of akin to creating an assignment in D2L Brightspace. That if you were in your face-to-face class, they're coming to class to present, or they're actually handing a project into you in class. So you're receiving a paper copy or you're receiving a presentation of some sort. You wanted to have that assignment placeholder in D2L Brightspace to give your students a guide and instructions for that activity that's housed in one place. It also works for activities that, let's say they're doing on the web. So maybe you want the students to take a little quiz on another website or do something on another website that doesn't require them to actually turn it in, but you want to designate it as an assignment. So you can use either the on paper or the observed in person option to create that, create an assignment that doesn't require students to actually submit something for the work. So I'm going to do a file submission first. I'm going to show you what both the file submission looks like and the text submission looks like. And then what you can do is type in your instructions. I'm just going to copy paste some instructions that I have. And say, please answer the following 4 questions. And then you can add your questions, your prompt, whatever it might be here. And then you can click Save. And when you first create the folder, if you notice on that one page, on the previous page, there was a checkbox that said hidden or active. And what you want to do is make sure if you want it to stay hidden for students because you're still working on it, you can keep it hidden. And then once you save, you can come down here to the activity details and you can just make it visible for students. And then on top of that, you just scroll down a little bit more and there's an add dates and restrictions option for your assignments. So let's click on that and see what we have. We have a start date, a due date, and an end date. And I'll talk to you briefly about what all of those mean for an assignment. For the assignment, the start date is when this assignment becomes visible to the student. So it appears in D2L Brightspace for them. A due date is what it sounds like, a due date. And the end date is the date that the assignment folder locks and no more submissions are accepted. So you might be thinking, well, when would I use a due date or an end date? If your due date is the date and time you want the submission folder to close entirely for your students, then don't need to use both, just use the end date. If you want a grace period for your students, for instance, like a 1-hour grace period or maybe a couple days, it's due on Friday, but they can submit late up until Sunday night, something like that, then you would set a due date for the actual day it's due, and then the end date would be the end of the grace period. And then the folder would actually lock for you. So that is kind of how you would set up due dates and end dates. But if it's the same, the due date is the day you want your folder to close, then you just use the end date and don't worry about it. If you're an instructor who still allows students to submit assignments throughout the term late, then you would want to set just the due date because the due date doesn't lock the folder, but it does mark your assignments at the student submissions as late. It marks them in red and it tells you how many days late the assignment was submitted. So that is a really handy feature of the due date. So those are your options when using and setting up dates for an assignment. And another thing that's really wonderful about this is that it actually sends this date to the calendar on the homepage. And so when the students log in to the homepage, they can see the due dates of their assignments right there. And that's really handy. And also they can link it to their Google Gmail accounts so they can sync the due dates in D2L Brightspace with their Google Calendars, for instance, or whatever calendar they're using. And if they're using the Pulse app, there's a great app for students called Pulse. And it also will allow them to get notifications and so on right to their phones. Because D2L, if the student sets up notifications, I talked about this in my Basics 1, the student sets up a notification for an assignment folder, they can set it up so that they get a notification 2 days in advance of the due date as a reminder that they have an upcoming assignment due. So there's some handy little features for keeping your students on track when you do use the dates option for assignments and its discussions and quizzes. All right, so let me go back to the week 1 module. And as I was showing you in the previous sessions, there's a couple of ways to go back to content, you can either select week 1 from the breadcrumbs menu. That's what it's called, breadcrumbs, when you have a list of links along the top right here that kind of goes back in hierarchy. You can click on week 1, or you can just click on content again, or you can click on the next button here in the on the page. So here we are in week 1. You can see my reflection 1 assignment. It's labeled as an assignment, and I have my questions. Now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do a text submission 1, and I'm going to show you the difference between the two and what it looks like from the student's point of view. So let me click the blue upload create button. I'm going to say I'm going to create another assignment. And I'm going to call it reflection number 1. And this time I'm going to use a text submission. This means your students do not have to upload a file. They can write their answers directly in a text box in D2L Brightspace. So it actually is a little bit simpler for them to submit an assignment than it is to download a file and then upload or whatever it might be. And then answer the following questions. Now, what I didn't show in the previous example is, let's say you wanted to attach a file that you want your students to download, work on, and then upload, or just a file you want them to be able to download that has more detailed instructions. So if you have like an assignment that's like 2 pages worth of instructions, you probably don't want to put all that text into the instructions field here in D2L Brightspace. In the other, what you would do instead is just provide a brief overview of what the assignment is, and then provide a link to the document that has the full instructions of the assignment. So let me show you how to do that. What you would do is click on the first button in the toolbar. It's called Insert Stuff. It has a little play icon. You click on the Insert Stuff button. You can add files from your computer. Or if you're linking from like Google Docs or somewhere else on the web, you can insert a link. So those are the 2 options that you can use to kind of link attachments or files to your assignment description. So I'm going to add something from my computer so I can just show you what that looks like. And then I'm going to choose a file. And then I can search my computer for the file that I want. I'm just going to grab this worksheet. It's you can have a Word document, a PDF, however you have the format is fine. Click open, select it, and then click open. And then just select the upload button. Click on the blue upload button, and it'll upload the file. And then it'll prompt you to provide a meaningful link text. So it's not just the file name. So I'll just do worksheet template. And then I'm going to click insert. And what I can do, say, please use the.
Okay, guys, I'm on a training now. Please leave me alone.
Mute your audio there, Rebecca. All right. So I'm going to write, please use the worksheet template, and then the template is linked. And since it's a PDF, I'm just going to also make a note for students so they know what type of file it is. So if it's a document, it'll be .doc, docx. If it's a docx file, something to keep in mind is docx. I think a PDF will view in the web in your browser. But if it's a doc file or a PowerPoint file or an Excel file or any other type of file, it will prompt a download. So it might be worthwhile to also say doc files download will be, or prompt for a download or something like that, or download doc can work for you too, so they know that they have to download a file to view it. So you could say download the worksheet template if I had written it as a doc file, and then just put docx in the brackets. Okay, I'm going to click save. My directions have been created, and I'm going to click save. And then I'm going to scroll down. I feel confident about it. I'm going to make sure that it's not hidden so students can view it. And then I'm also going to set up a due date for this assignment. or you can set up an end date, as I was talking about before. So let's see. I just want you to see what it looks like when you have a due date set up. So I'm going to say it's due tomorrow at 8 a.m. And maybe I will give a grace period for technical difficulties. So they'll have until tomorrow at 9 a.m. to submit the assignment, to give them just a little bit of grace, and then click update. So let's go back to the content area and see what this looks like. So now I have my Reflection 1 assignment. This is the one I didn't set a date for, but I did make it visible for students. And this is the Reflection 1 that was a text submission, and I did put dates for students here. And what's nice is this will actually show up in the course calendar. So let me just pop over to the course homepage and show you what it looks like in the calendar. I have a lot of things, but here you see March 26th at 8 a.m. Reflection number 1 due. So it'll pop up into the calendar and populate. I'm going to go back into where we were, the module, and I'm going to view as a student so you can see what these assignment folders look like from the student side. Okay, so I've viewed as a student. As an instructor, if you want to view as a student, you can do what I just did, which is click on your name and select View as Student. Then click on Contents. And now we're in student view, so they can see the assignment and both types of assignments. So let's look at the text submission first and see what it looks like from the student's perspective. So I click on the assignment, I see my instructions, and then underneath the instructions, there's a place for submissions. It's telling me that I haven't submitted an assignment yet, and then I can drag and drop files below, or I can upload. If you notice, there's also a button for recording. So if you're an instructor who wants students to present some audio or a video of some sort for their assignment, maybe it's a speech class, or maybe it's a foreign language course that they need to practice speaking and you can leave feedback, they can use this record option instead to upload the file, which is really convenient. So I'm just going to upload a file from my computer so you can see what that looks like. And it won't be an actual assignment, but I'm just going to upload a document or the worksheet. I'll upload a Word document. And then the student can also leave comments saying, you know, this was really hard. I hope I got it right. And then they would select or click Submit. And then once they've clicked Submit, they will see that their worksheet file is up here in the submission and their comments and the date and time that it was posted. Now let's go to the text submission option. I'm going to click the next button since it was the next item in our list, so you can see what that looks like. Okay, it looks very, very similar when you're looking at it from the top. You still have the title of this document, or the assignment, and then you have your instructions, and then you have the submission section, but instead of the option to upload a file, the student can just start typing their responses to the questions here. And then they can click Submit. And what you'll see is the student will see their submission, the date and time, but instead of having to upload a file, they were able to just type in their answers into the text field. And there's a variety of formatting options that are available to the student. They can insert a link, let's say to a Google Doc if they wanted to, or a slide deck, or they could upload photos, whatever it might be that they need to do with this submission. But there is some flexibility with formatting, and they don't have to have Word or a word processing software on their computers to do it. They could just type in everything right from the text submission field. This is really useful for assignments that are fairly simple and straightforward in nature. that don't really require a Word document. Like you might, with an essay, you might want really good formatting, and so you want it formatted a certain way, or if you're doing like showing students how to do a memorandum or something where you're actually wanting some sort of file upload, then the file submission is the one for you. But if it's assignment that students can just type in and the answers or responses to, or maybe it's a reflection prompt and you just want the students to reflect on the week, the text submission is going to probably be the easiest option for your students to manage, because they can do that really easily on their mobile devices and so on too. Oh, hi, Alejandra. Yes, so if you're not seeing an option, your documents from Google as an option for files, it's because you haven't activated your Google Apps account with D2L Brightspace. So if you go to My Home, I'm just going to open this up in a new tab. So you click on the little big house, the house icon in the upper left-hand corner, go to My Home. There is a widget in the upper right-hand corner called Access Google Apps. You need to authorize this. And once you do, when you want to submit a file, then your Google Drive will pop up as an option. You're welcome. I'm glad that answered your question. And so how Alejandra's comment is really worthwhile to make a note of is that when students or you as an instructor link to your Google Drive account from that My Home page, you can actually add files directly from your Google Drive. If you noticed, let me just click in here. Oh, I'm viewing as a student. So if you find that you can't edit something and you had recently been viewing as a student, it's because you're still in student mode. So let me stop being in student mode. And let's go to content again. And let me go into the insert stuff, and I'm going to show you my computer. So when you are adding files from your Google Drive, there's a couple of ways you can see it. It does pop up as an attachment option for the assignments tool, but you can also add content directly from your Google Drive too. So I'm just going to show you what the menu looks like really quickly. So if I clicked on upload files, for instance, you will have an option for Google Drive. And let's say I was viewing as a student. I'll show you how students would add from their Google Drive really quick. They would, instead of uploading, I don't think the upload files, yeah, upload is just from your computer, but what students would do is click on choose existing, and Google Drive will pop up there for them. They can click on Google Drive, and then all your Google Drive files will show up. You can search for them, and then it'll insert the file. So, for instance, and what it does is it converts a Google Doc to a Word document for D2L. And then you can just click submit, or the student would click submit in that case. And you can, if you go into settings, you can set it up so that you restrict how many files the students can upload. If you can restrict it to like one file, but if the student accidentally uploads the wrong file, it's kind of nice to have the option for them to upload multiple files, which is the default setting, as you can see. All right, so that is the basics of adding an assignment to the content area, whether it's a file submission or a text submission. Is there any questions on assignments and that basic setup right now? If there isn't, then I'm going to move on and show you discussions. And I need to stop viewing as a student. So if you notice, the views for a student and the views for instructor are very, very similar, which is nice. So you're not having a completely different view for students. The only difference really is their down arrows don't have as many editing options. In fact, there aren't any editing options. There's options to like download and so on. So now let's go to the blue Upload Create button, and we're going to select a discussion. We're going to create a discussion topic. Yes. Let me actually show you that really quick. I'll backtrack a little bit and show you what it looks like when you're reviewing assignment. So what you want to do when you want to review assignments is click on the Assignments tool from the toolbar, and it'll take you to the list of assignments that you've created in your course. So I created 2 reflection ones, one for a file submission and one for a text submission. We'll look at what it looks like for both from the viewpoint of the instructor. So I'm going to click on reflection 1. And what it does is it'll list your students and all their submissions that they have. So I'm going to click on one of the files. Actually, let me go back to submissions. So next to each name in the table, there is a link for evaluate. You can click on evaluate, or you can select the actual file to go to that evaluation tab. I'm just going to click evaluate and show you what that looks like. And then you choose the file you want to grade. You just click on the file, and it'll come up in a viewer. And what's neat about this viewer is you can actually highlight elements on it. You can annotate using your mouse, or if you have a tablet, you can use your pen and do some writing, or your finger. You can zoom in, pan. You can leave comments on the document, leave notes. And then you can also provide overall feedback in this feedback box. And then you would just publish your responses to your students. When you set up points for the assignment and it's linked to the gradebook, there'll be a spot for you to add the number of points. But right now we're talking about just getting the folder there, and we can talk about adding that part in when you're able to attend an actual assignments training, or you can dig around in the tools yourself. But I just wanted to show you how to get a basic folder up and be able to view the assignment afterwards. Great, thank you, Lisa. I'm glad that works. And so the text submission is going to view similarly in the viewer. All right. So let's go back to content, and I'm going to show you how to just quickly add a discussion topic. So from the blue Upload Create button, I will select New Discussion. And this will go a little bit quicker since we've really gone into the assignments, and it's structured very similarly to assignments. So you would want to enter a title for your discussion. And you would want to make sure your topic is in a forum. So if you're in a course that doesn't have a forum, it'll prompt you that you would need to create a new forum. The forums, so all the topics have to live within a forum, but you don't need to have a forum for every topic. So create one forum. If you, many of the shells that we provided this template to have a discussion forum already created, general discussions. So you can just add your discussion topics right to the general discussions forum, and it'll just list all your topics in order. So the forums kind of categorize your discussion topics, as it were. Or you could create a new one and call it weekly discussions if you like. but just make sure you don't have a separate forum for each individual topic. You just create one forum and you can put all your discussion topics in that forum. So here you can see the checkbox hide from users. When I click the save button, I don't want to have to toggle the hidden. So I'm going to uncheck that box right now, and I'm going to add in some instructions. And for sake of time, I'll just copy paste my original questions in here. But you can just write whatever prompt you want. You could add a link to a video if you want the students to watch a video and then comment and talk about it, or a link to an article to read and then they reflect on that article. So that is one way of managing the discussions. One thing about discussions is you don't have to use it necessarily for discussions. You can use it for things like a peer review, where you want students to submit an assignment and you want other students to be able to see it too. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a discussion-oriented, like where it's going to be a complete back and forth on a particular discussion topic. You can think of it in terms of like peer review, or maybe you wanted students to post like a blog post or something like that, but it doesn't really require comment back. You just want everyone else to see what other people wrote. So that's what you would use the discussion tool for. So there is flexibility, obviously, with these tools. They don't have to be limited just to what they're named. There's a lot of uses that these tools can be used for. So now I've hidden it from, or I've unhidden it from students. And I have my instructions, and I'm going to click Save. And it's being sent to my general discussions forum. And now, here's my discussion one. And then this is exactly what the students will see as well. They'll, when they click on the link, they'll see discussion one, pitfalls to economic reasoning. They'll have my prompt to it, and then they would just click Start a New Thread, and they would title it. And maybe I have the instructions for them to answer one of these questions. So they're going to answer the filing for bankruptcy one. So I'm going to have them title their discussion post with the prompt title, filing for bankruptcy. And then they are going to just write their response. If I could type this morning. All right. And then when they're done, they just click Post. And then the students' posts will just start showing up in a list here. And for other students, or for you as an instructor, if you want to go in and view Rondi's post, you click on the title of her post, and then you would click Reply to Thread. The initial post is the thread, and then the replies that people do are replies to threads. So then you just click on Reply to Thread and be like, you need to provide a little more information, and click Post. And then you can respond, or students can respond. So this kind of shows you how that interaction works in the discussion forum. Also, when you're looking at the discussion topic, let me go back to week 1. And I'm going to click on the discussion topic. So when you first click Save after the discussion and you have your Start Your New Thread, if you scroll down a little bit further, again, you'll see this Activities Details tab, just like you did for the assignment underneath Submissions. You can make sure that it's visible, and you can also set dates and restrictions. There's a caveat with discussions. Discussions have a slew of date options available to it if you go into the actual tool. These options that you see here are visibility options. The start and end date make the discussion topic visible to students. So if you set a start date, it'll make it visible. And so that is the same as with discussions with assignments. But the end date, instead of locking the folder or locking the discussion forum or topic, it makes it invisible. So students can't see it anymore. They can't see what other people posted. They can't see what you posted. They can't go back after the due date and time and just look at what was done in that discussion forum. Especially, students tend to do their work at the last minute, so they make their posts. People go in and reply to them at 11 p.m. at night, and then the next day, oh, it's gone, and no one can review any of those replies or comments. So don't use this end date here in the activity details section for or in the content area for discussions. What you want to use is just the due date. Just use the due date here and you'll be good to go, and it will show up in the calendar, and that's when you can say your discussion posts are due. Do it 9 a.m. tomorrow. And then you would just click update. So now, if I go back to week 1, I'm going to scroll down. Here's my discussion topic, and it's telling me that it's due on March 26th. And again, students will get flagged if it's past the due date and so on. Okay, are there any questions on discussions and how to add a quick discussion topic to your content area to your course? Okay, if there aren't any questions on discussion topics, I'll move on to quizzes because that's going to take a little bit more time. And I definitely want to make sure that you have a good basic understanding of creating a basic quiz. If you want more information on, the settings for assignments, the settings for discussions, I really recommend you head over and take the discussions or assignment webinar session for those. And you'll get a lot more information there, but this is the basics to get you started for week 1, and you'll be good to go. So you don't have to feel a lot of pressure to get into the nitty-gritty settings at this juncture. All right, so let's do a quiz, and we'll use the same method to start a quiz. And there's a few more steps in this, and so sometimes instructors might find it's just easier to create quizzes directly from the quiz tool. But I'm just going to continue on the same vein. I started with adding assignments from the content area. And it's really not any more difficult. It's just, I think there might be an extra click. So here you'll select Upload Create. And you'll click on New Quiz. And you'll enter a title for your quiz. And what I'm going to do is keep it hidden from users because I can't add questions here. I'm just going to add some instructions. So this is a time quiz. You have 20 minutes to answer 10 questions. You will have 2 attempts, and the highest score is sent to the gradebook. So that's an example of the type of instructions you might want to provide on your quiz before the student enters and clicks Start Quiz. And I'll talk about some of these settings when we go into the quiz and walk through it. Okay, so I've added, there's 2 places to add instructions. I just added instructions, and there's another menu that says instructions up here. Really, this instructions block, only instructors really see it. It's buried at the very bottom of a page for students. This instruction set is at the top of the page for students. So something I tend to do is I just copy paste, and I make it easy on myself. And then that way, when I'm looking at it from my view, I also see the instructions at the top. This is a quirk within D2L Brightspace. You can leave it blank. It's not going to hurt anything. The one that's really important is going to be the one that's in the activity details section. And then I'll click Update. And what I need to do is start adding questions. And I'm going to leave it hidden because there aren't any questions. And when I've got the questions into the quiz, then I will unhide it. Is unhide a word? All right. So when you come in, when you click on quiz setup, you are taken directly to the properties tab. When you go into each of the tools in D2L Brightspace, whether it's an assignment or discussion, you'll have a very similar format. There'll be a properties tab, restrictions tab, assessment tab. The quizzes have a few more tabs than the others do, but we're just going to talk about the tabs that are most important to you right now. So I'm going to add edit questions. When you click on the add edit questions button for the first time, you may get a prompt that asks you to use the new experience. Just say yes, because it's great. It's easy and simple and fresh. So use the new experience. It'll make your life a lot easier. And then you can just start adding questions. If you have a quiz or something and it's only like maybe not many more than 20 questions or so, maybe even 30, you can just copy paste those, and you might find it faster than trying to reformat your existing quiz to upload as an import file, because everything in your original Word document or something would have to be formatted specifically for the import file. And sometimes I find that instructors found it easier just to copy paste if it wasn't a really long quiz. So let's click add, and I'm going to click a new question. And there's a lot of options to choose from: true, false, multiple choice, multi-select, short answer. If you notice, I'm skipping over written response, and I will talk about why in a second. Short answer, multi-short answer, fill in the blank, matching, ordering, oh my goodness, they keep going, arithmetic, and significant figures. The majority of these aren't used very often unless you're a math instructor. But all the rest of those that I listed, all of the ones that I listed are auto-graded. So you don't have to manually go in and grade. D2L Brightspace will do the grading for you. The only one that has to be manually graded is the written response. So obviously, maybe you have a quiz that has short answer responses that they have to reflect on a particular question or something, and each individual student's answers are going to be unique. And there's no way for D2L to automatically grade unique answers like that. So you would have to manually grade that question. But the rest of the quiz would be auto-graded for you. So you can just, double check things and just check the written response portion of the quiz. Or what I've used the response questions for is in my class at the end, I had, in one of my classes, I had a timed essay. So I had to take my final exam online. I think it was for the snow or something. And so I needed to have it. They were supposed to write responses to 3 essay questions in class, not long essays, short essays, but it was timed, and I needed a timed experience for them. So I actually put the essays into D2L Brightspace in the quiz tool, and I randomized it so that each student got a different essay that they had to write. So no two students really, they didn't all get like the same quiz question, or essay questions. And then I just manually graded their essays right in the quiz tool. So there are different and unique ways you can use the quiz tool that don't really require you to use it as a multiple choice or a true false quiz. You can also set up the quizzes to be open all week long, and you can just use it as an assignment. I've done that in my class where I have fill in the blank questions where I teach economics. So I'll have a question, and then they have to write in the values for the various prompts. And it's a homework assignment like they'd see on a publisher platform, and then they can just work on it throughout the week and then submit. So it doesn't have to be like a timed quiz if you don't want it to be. Quiz tool can be quite versatile. So let's just show you a multiple choice question to show you how easy this interface is. So you have a multiple choice question, and you selected the wrong one. You still have a chance to change it to the one you want. You can write in a question. I'm going to put in answers of red, orange, purple, if I can type, and black. Obviously, the question is what color is not in the rainbow? Black is not in the rainbow. So let's select black as our answer. And you can actually add, if you go up to options, you can add feedback. If you don't want to add feedback for each individual selection, you can just, the default is no feedback. But if you go in and click options, you could add feedback for each individual response. You could add a hint. You could add some sort of short description. You can actually add custom weights. So let's say it's a multiple choice question, but one is like sort of right, and you want to give students 50% credit on it. You can do that. Let me just show you what that looks like. So here you can say this is a 100% answer, and then you could say, okay, well, orange is going to be a 50% answer. And so now they'll get half credit if they select orange, and full credit if they select black, and no credit if they did red or so it's kind of neat. You can select specific weights for questions as well. You can remove the custom weights and just go back to having just the question. And then you would select how many points the question is worth. You do need to have points associated with the question. So, and then also you can randomize answers for each student. And since we're going into an online environment, I highly recommend you do this, because it's inevitable that you have students who may talk or work together or something. You have two friends who are taking the same online course. They had planned to take the class together in face-to-face, and now they're both online. And what this can do is if it randomizes the answer, one student can go to the other student and say, oh yeah, here's the answers that I did for the quiz. It's A, B, C, D, E. And the other student takes the quiz, but it randomizes it, and they select the same order of answers, but it won't be correct, obviously, because they were randomized. So it's a really good way of helping to minimize that cheating or working together that you might find. And then just click save. And then you have your question pops up in your list, and you can just start adding more questions as you go. And then it'll keep track of the total points for the entire quiz. When you're done with that, you can just, so this is the pop-up you would get. Welcome to the new quiz building experience. You would just say, turn it on. I have it on. So let's go back to the quiz settings. What to do, you just click on at the top upper left, back to quiz settings for quiz 1. And I have my questions. Let's say I have all 10 questions in here. I have my questions. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to select the restrictions tab. And here in the restrictions tab, you'll see those, the due date, the start and end date, just like you did with assignments. And they work exactly the same as assignments. Discussions is the only one that's different. Just set that due date for discussions for now. But assignments and quizzes work exactly the same. The start date is your availability. It's when it becomes visible for students. And then, or the quiz opens, unlocks for students. And then the end date is when the quiz locks for students. And the due date is just a due date. And if you only set a due date, students can still submit this assignment through the quiz tool until it's actually locked using an end date. So if you're due, like I was saying before, if your due date and your end date are the exact same, then use your end date option only. You don't have to use the due date option. So let me just set an end date. I'm going to make the end date to be the Friday at, say, 6 p.m. And then I said it was timed. You don't have to have a time quiz. The default is a recommended time limit, and it just says, okay, it'll take about 120 minutes. It's the default. This doesn't enforce any kind of time. But I said that I wanted it enforced, so I'm going to click on the enforced time limit option. And I said it was going to be 20 minutes. And I'm going to give them a 1 period grace period, or a 1 minute grace period after the 20 minutes. It's kind of like, okay, I'm handing in my paper to my students in class. Or my students are handing the paper in to me in class. And then down here, the exceeded time limit behavior, what you want to happen when the time limit is up. The options are allow the student to continue working, prevent the student from making further changes, and allow the student to continue working, but automatically score the attempt as 0. I think the most common option that you would use is the middle option, prevent the student from making any more changes. This prompts the student to submit the quiz when the time is up. And then special access is something you can talk about if you go to the quiz tool session, but it allows you to do extended time. So if you had a student, for instance, that needed time and a half on assignments, you would go into special access, and this says allow selected users special access to the quiz. You would go in, add users to special access, and you would just set up, you would select you would set up the time, the date and time it's due, and then you would set the specific amount of minutes. So in this case, it was time and a half. I need to do 30 minutes for that particular student, and then I would select the students below it. Let me just show you what that looks like really quick. So as you can see, you can keep the same date and time. It populates that information for you. The timing, no changes. There is a change to timing. I need to do an enforced time limit of 30 minutes for this particular student. And then I'm going to keep, you could assign an alternative grace period for the student, or you could keep it the same. I'm just going to keep it the same. I'm also going to keep the exceeded time limit behavior exactly the same. And then you can choose how many attempts the student can have, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. And then you just choose the student from the list that needs that accommodation and click Add Special. And what it does, in the Settings Restrictions tab, when you scroll down to Special Access, it lists all the students that have special access and the time and whatever conditions that are associated with that you set. All right, so the last tab that I want you to consider in quizzes is the Assessment tab. You can set it up to automatically be sent to the gradebook. You can create a grade item and so on. And if you do that, you want to make sure it says you want to select auto export to grades. I'm not going to set that up right now. If you go to the quiz tool session, they'll show you how to set that up. But what you do want to set up is how many attempts. Do you want your students to do it once? Do you want them to do it twice? And I can't remember what I said, but I think I said twice. And you can then select overall grade calculation. So if you have 2 attempts, then you can select, they can have the highest attempt, or maybe you're doing an average of all the attempts. So you want to encourage them to increase their score, but their first quiz score is taken into account. So I think I wrote highest attempt on my instructions, so I'll just leave it as highest attempt. But you can keep it as 1 attempt as well. And then now you've gone through those major settings in quizzes, you can just click Save and Close. And I can unhide my my activity now for students since my quizzes are set up. Are the students so Lisa has a great question. Are the students notified that the quiz is timed when they click on it? There are there is information that's posted on the quiz page, and I can show you what that looks like. Let me click the preview button. So under quiz details, it's auto-populated. The quiz period is from April 30th, is until April 3rd, and the time allowed is 30. But some students just scroll through this overall information and then just click the Start Quiz button. So that's why I always recommend in that description, you actually provide the information that's necessary for the student. So I have here in the description, this is a timed quiz. You have 20 minutes to answer 10 questions. And this just gives them that bird's eye view. And it's what they see in the content area too. So I'll show you that. You go back to content. And if I scroll down, here's quiz 1, and it provides them with a description. And you could actually be even more clear in the description. If I click on it, I can edit this description. You have 20 minutes from the moment you click start quiz to answer 10 questions. And that is the case. So let's say the student starts the quiz and leaves. The timer is counting even if they leave the quiz. It doesn't stop the timer. So if a student accidentally hits start quiz and then goes and makes themselves dinner and they come back an hour later and the quiz is over, and they need to email you and say, I accidentally clicked start quiz, and then you need to determine whether or not how you want to handle that scenario. Okay, we are at time. This really gives you that brief overview of all 3 tools in one. If you have questions, like I was saying, or want to do a deeper dive into all 3 tools, go to one of the specific sessions on that tool. If you have questions about this session or anything I covered in this session, feel free to reach out to me. My email is rondi.schei@pcc.edu. And I'm happy to answer them, or at least direct you to the people who can answer them for you. But with that, I hope this has been very useful for you. And if you have any further questions, I can hang on a little bit to answer those before we sign off. If I have 5 versions of quiz 1, can I assign a specific version to a student? So one thing you can do in the quiz tool, Salvador, yes, you could create groups and set up different quizzes to students. But what I might recommend is if you have 5 versions of quiz 1, you create a question pool. And you can create question pools. You could create a question pool. And what you would do is you would put all questions from all 5 versions into that pool. And then you would say that each student gets 20 questions from that pool. And that would randomize the quiz for each individual student, and it would be pulling questions from a pool instead of just the 20 questions that you uploaded. So hopefully that answers your question. Yes. Okay, great. Thanks, Salvador. So Rebecca, yes. So in the Getting Started page, there is a how to get started with D2L Brightspace, and we do have a page on how to communicating online expectations. But what I would recommend is for you to include that information in your syllabus for if you're planning to have discussions. I teach economics, and at certain times of the year, especially during election season, topics can get a little heated. So I just make sure to remind students to be respectful, that we can use and talk about economics to explain any political point of view, so that we just need to stick to the economics and so on. And be respectful for other people's points of view. So yes, you definitely want to have that information stated somewhere in your syllabus, or even as part of your prompt for your first discussion, so they get used to seeing that. Good luck, everyone. I hope you take some time this afternoon or this morning to start adding some assignments and put into practice what we talked about today. And good luck.